Hello and welcome to Walsall's Homelessness Forum for 2020. Homelessness in Walsall is on the increase. We know that the impacts of COVID-19 have made this worse, and currently the biggest cause of homelessness in Walsall is people failing at their private sector landlord tenancies. Other issues that have also been impacted by the pandemic are the growth in mental health issues and increased pressures in terms of unemployment. And that's why it's absolutely vital that we work together as partners across the borough to support people and to reduce the impact of homelessness. I believe strongly in the importance of partnership as we work together to share our objectives and make sure that we're supporting people and reducing the impact of homelessness across Walsall.
I'm Councillor Cooper, and I've been representing the residents of Shorteath since 2015. Our first theme is social care, where we will try to talk about trying to help older people with complex needs to stay in their own homes for as long as possible. Our second theme is young people. We will tell you about some of the barriers we have faced, the good partnerships we have created to prevent young people from becoming homeless. Our third theme is domestic abuse. This is where we will show you the challenges faced by a service user and working with our refuge provider, WHG, our housing providers and our housing IDVA.
Yeah, my name's Aidan Roche. I work in Walsall Public Health. And I have an interest in the partnership work between the Housing Department and the Public Health Department to improve the life chances of particularly the most vulnerable in our society. The easiest way to measure someone's health is look at what their life expectancy is. And it's been found that people who rough sleep, for men, their life expectancy is 44, and for women, it's even lower, it's 42. So the impact on people's health is significant when they don't have a secure house. 4 years ago, Public Health and the Housing Department in the Council decided to run a very short pilot of a 30-day winter night shelter. And we based that at the Glebe Centre on Bradford Street in Walsall. It is a homeless day centre that Public Health have been investing an annual contract with them for the last 10 years. It's a very, very small contract and it has very limited scope to be able to offer support. But what we always thought was the 26 individuals that were found on the street count was probably an underestimate of the size of the problem in Walsall. And we found just in that 30-day period, 60 individuals turned up at the service and all declared themselves homeless. This obviously was a much larger number than we expected. But what the 30 days allowed us to do, it allowed us to get very, very close to those individuals and to understand what their underlying needs were, and helped us then plan to invest in those support services to help those individuals improve their health. But what was fundamental to improving their health was first of all addressing the housing issue, addressing their homelessness. And before we could address any of the health issues, getting them accommodated was the first thing that we needed to do. Initially, I got money through the Rough Sleepers Initiative grant, and we have, over the last 3 years, been successful at bringing in over £450,000 a year to support rough sleeping in Walsall, which has gone on to support a 6-month night shelter. So based on our initial 30 days, we then went straight into finding a better location, and then also contracting with local services. Black Country YMCA were the company who had been running the Glebe Centre services for many years and were also successful through a competitive tender process at winning the contract for the night shelter and have delivered it for the last 3 years. During that 6-month period, we find that quite consistently 150 individuals utilise the service over the 6-month period.
Hi, my name's Sienna Laster. I'm the Principal Social Worker in Adult Social Care at Walsall Council. And I'm really pleased to be talking about homelessness today. It's really something that we need to think about as a council, and also social workers have particular roles and responsibilities in relation to some of the most vulnerable people that we have in Walsall. We really want to work collaboratively with our housing colleagues, and I'm really excited to read about the Housing First project, because what I can see there is that there's some really key ethics and values that as social workers that we would align to in terms of that. So if you're thinking about choice and control, about actively engaging people, about recognising people's strengths, building on their goals and aspirations, really sticking with people and being very relationship focused in terms of helping people get better outcomes. That's really what social work is about as well. So I can really see the connectivity around the great work that's happening in Walsall and what in adult social care we would want to support with. Now, in terms of the social worker's role, that's clearly defined within the Care Act 2014. And what we can see from that legislation, it is a principle called the Wellbeing Principle. And I know that that really underpins a lot of the work going on around homelessness as well. So looking holistically at people's strengths, at people's assets, and about connecting people with the resources that they need. So one of the categories of abuse and neglect that was introduced through the Care Act was self-neglect. And clearly, when you're working with people who are homeless, who may be living on the street, there is always going to be an element of self-neglect there for whatever reason. There may also be, issues around substance and alcohol misuse, and also concerns around mental health. All of these are things that we would consider in adult social care as potentially care and support needs as defined in the Care Act. So we would be keen to be completing an assessment for anybody who may fall into that category, where we might be able to link them up with the care and support that they might need. I would say generally what we're seeing in Walsall is increased complexity around mental disorder and some of the presentation around illness at the moment. There's a lot of pressure on our partners within mental health services, very short of acute beds, for example, in terms of meeting people's needs at the moment. And clearly this is going to impact the care and support that people who may be homeless or on the edge of homelessness are receiving at the moment. The other thing that we've seen, through the current pandemic is an increase in substance and alcohol misuse. So again, that's obviously having an impact on people's well-being. We're seeing increased numbers of redundancies, for example, people unable to pay their rent, maintain their mortgage payments, etc. So that's always going to put people more at risk of homelessness. This is a national issue, but it's definitely something that we're seeing in Walsall as well. So I think the key for me is always working together across the partnership. So whether that's health, social care, housing, the voluntary sector, we've got some real strengths within our communities within Walsall. We've seen hundreds of volunteers trying to support each other through this time, and we really want to build on that and connect with those people who may be homeless or on the edge of homelessness.
My name's Carol Fox, and I'm the team leader or the senior support worker, as I'm known, for Housing First Walsall team. So with Housing First, the approach is to, instead of trying to prepare someone with complex need or who is an entrenched sleeper for accommodation, it's a bit like the other way around. You put them into the accommodation and then work out what they feel and what you suggest is best for them to sustain it and to manage that tenancy. The good thing about Housing First, I think, is that it's very person-centred, in that we can try and adapt to what would work best for that person, instead of expecting them to fit into what we think or what services think is a good thing. With Housing First, there's that knowledge that there's a team behind them. And so it's not like if I was a landlord taking somebody on thinking, not sure if I could deal with that, so it might negatively impact on your chances of getting accommodated. I think with Housing First, they've got someone to go to, haven't they? They've got somewhere to go and say, we're having a bit of a problem, and we can mediate. So, and if that person, hopefully that client that we're working with, if they have that trust in us, it works. Sometimes it can work well.
My name's Ian Melvin, I'm Housing and Welfare Lead at Walsall Council. I suppose pre-COVID times I managed the Housing and Welfare team, which includes homelessness, rough sleeping. So what we've done during lockdown, every day of the week we do outreach work in and around the town centre, but also anywhere where, like you may well have heard of Homeless Link, they notify some people who are potentially homeless in the borough. If they notify somebody anywhere in Walsall, obviously we'll go and try and find that person and look for a solution for their housing situation. Now in the short term that may be a bed and breakfast accommodation, but then we have staff who go there every day. We have a social worker who works for my team, so I can get specialist support plans drawn up by people who work with me, and then obviously we can include Housing First, who will assess people for the best housing route. And obviously if we think Housing First is the right route, obviously we then include Carol and the team, and they will come along and assess them. And if we think that's right, we then go to landlords in the borough such as WHG or Accord Housing, who are a good partner for housing people, because what they can see with us is that we'll help people and support people in their properties. We don't just move them into a property and abandon them. We actually move them in and support them in partnership with other people to make sure they have the best chance of succeeding in that tenancy moving forward.
We left Syria 9 years ago and we started living in Lebanon. We came to UK from Lebanon. In Lebanon we were living in a refugee camp. So the situation was very bad, the condition was very bad. Safety was very important for me and my family. We came here, at least our children can access education. The senior living in a refugee camp there in Lebanon, they can't access any education. Everything here for us, it was organized and stable. We found the help from the GP, we found the access to education. Everything was available. We don't need even to ask what we need. Everything was available for us here in UK.
Hi, I'm Jean Templeton. I'm Chief Exec of St Basil's. St Basil's is a youth housing association. It's also a charity. We don't want homelessness to be part of young people's experience of growing up. We don't think it should be. So we have a range of services. We have youth hubs both in Birmingham and Solihull. So they are the single point of access for any 16 to 25-year-old who is homeless or at risk. So it's been really interesting over this last COVID period since March, because clearly it's kind of shone like a magnifying glass on the housing challenges for young people. What we've seen in this last period really is kind of affirmed all of the issues that we knew about. So there are both personal and there are structural drivers around youth homelessness. We all know that the benefit levels for under 35s don't meet rent levels. So a combination of different pressures will mean that more young people are going to become homeless, sadly, and that's what we're anticipating. So you've got the health crisis, magnifying the housing crisis, affected by the economic crisis, and particularly impacting on certain employment, certain types of work. Those particularly affect young people. So we've been working with young people throughout this period, and we've learnt a lot from them. We've been having lots and lots of dialogue with them. We've had a scheme called Room to Talk, so that they've always got someone they can talk to, because it's scary when you're on your own, and particularly if you haven't got many comforts and possessions. So learning a lot from them. What's really important to them is digital connectivity, digital inclusion going forward is going to be really, really important. Because if we are going to have the flexibility to support young people in different ways, to use WhatsApp, to use all that, we tend to think everybody's got they've got smartphones, they've got laptops, they've got, sort of iPads or whatever. But they don't all have that. And if they've got no money and they're trying to live on £60 a week, they certainly don't have that. So we've got to look at things like that. And co-designing the rules. That's the other thing they say. Involve us in deciding what works and what doesn't. Because if we're part of it, we're far more likely to own it. And then that helps with compliance. And if we can collectively create a system that enables young people to live, work, earn and learn, and we do that for all young people, and we use our resources collectively and creatively in order to achieve that, rather than having lots of silo systems that we all go off and purchase individual bits that don't join up, then that will be really important. And I think our region, because of the collaboration in our region, we've got a regional homelessness task force, our authorities work together really, really well. I really think we've got a better chance of tackling this issue in a really kind of innovative and creative way, so that we are designing out youth homelessness. I feel optimistic about that.
My name's Georgina Atkins. I'm parenting lead for Early Help Services here in Walsall, part of Children's Services. So Early Help focuses on a number of areas to prevent youth homelessness, really. One of those is working in trauma-informed ways with parents and young people as well, so that they can really understand their histories and their experiences of adversity and how that's affecting them today. The other way that we work to prevent youth homelessness as well is working around real strong relationships in families through whole family working approaches. So we very much focus on attachments and quality attachments between parents and children and young people as well. We also work with our partners as well, so we really try and get an understanding of what's behind the behaviour. It's not just what we see on face value, we really focus on trying to get the voice of the child and the real key needs of the child to the forefront, really. We also work directly with young people as well, and we work hard to form trusting and supportive relationships with them, and we work with them in ways to help them understand how they can understand and manage their emotions and kind of express their emotions in ways that's going to be helpful for them. The way we work with families to ensure that we get there early on is early help's not just our responsibility, if you like. It's not just a children's services responsibility. We work with a whole variety of partners in health and education and third sector services to ensure that every family that they come into contact with, we're getting these messages out there, we're getting that support to them really early on, really, to prevent those problems becoming so entrenched later on. So it's like a whole partnership approach to that, really. When relationships do start to break down, and when families are not able to understand and reflect on how they've got to the places they are and how they need to move forward, that it can have some really serious impact on children and young people long term and on their life chances. Another area of work for us is working closely with our education partners and schools directly to ensure that children are included in school, that we're not in the situation where children are being excluded from school, something we know is a big risk factor for young people becoming homeless. And we do that through a variety of creative ways and engaging ways with schools, children, young people and their whole family, really. So we adopt things like restorative circles in schools when problems arise and restorative approach practices. In a nutshell, what we're always aiming to do with families is to work with them to early on before problems become entrenched, really, because we know that's really key in preventing long-term youth homelessness and increasing children's positive outcomes.
My name is Mohammed Ahmed and I work for WHE as a Young Person Temporary Accommodation Officer. The whole YP scheme involves around obviously supporting young people with semi-supported accommodation and managing them and providing them support and management a lifestyle where they over time become ready for independent living. So these young people have come from difficult family backgrounds, a lot of mental health and through the care system. And so building that rapport with a young person can be very difficult at times. So it's all about building the trust, building a relationship with a young person where they feel confident enough to open up to us and alongside the support workers who are part of Walsall Council. So when they come in, it's not just a property for them, it's more of a home where they can start their new life. Normally, from start to finish, what happens is Walsall Council would normally send us a nomination over, and that would have a risk assessment on the individual. So based on the previous history, if they come through the care system, if they come through a broken home, if they've been in sheltered accommodation, alongside obviously any previous criminal history. So what will the contractors then come into the property with myself, and what I normally tell them is to fully decorate the property. And that's not just to our letting standard, we go above and beyond our normal housing standard. So we really give it the finishing touch. For that young person, when they come in, they look at the property and think, wow, okay, they've really gone above and beyond for me. I'm going to maintain this property. And then what then we normally do moving forward is make sure that we're engaging with them on a weekly basis, alongside myself and obviously allocated support worker from Walsall Council. So we'd come out, do regular visits, make sure they're okay. But we're not just there to hold their hands in a sense. They are adults at the end of the day. So it's all about providing them a balanced support so they don't feel like we're on their case all the time. But they know that if they need us, we're there for them as well. I'm there to help them. And if it means that me making sure, me going above and beyond my role to make that they're happy where they are and for them to build their life moving forward in a more positive way than they came into the scheme, and then I'll do that. And building that trust is difficult in the beginning because it's hard for them to open up, but once I've built that trust, I've gone through that barrier, I've jumped over that hurdle, then it's all easy sailing.
From lockdown I was homeless, so I had to move in with my dad. Then I fled to the woods in Walsall, because I was familiar with the area. Stayed there for 3 weeks and someone from the Walsall Council found me. There were some skips down the road and I was taking the wood out of that. I built my own kitchen cupboards and everything in the woods and my own canopies and stuff with some tarpaulin, some wood. And just make the most of it as the best you can do with the situation you've got. If I get upset, it's better having the staff here because obviously I'm never on my own, then I never feel fully alone. It's been better knowing I can just talk to people and there's not one member of staff that's not approachable.
Hello, I'm Gary Brooks. I'm the Director of Housing at WHG. We do consider ourselves to be much more than a landlord, demonstrated by the additional support services that we provide to customers and helping them to sustain their tenancies and improve their lives. To date this year, we have been involved in 133 cases of domestic abuse, compared to 105 this time last year. We're involved in every level of partnership work within Walsall regarding domestic abuse, but the most crucial aspect of the partnership work is the day-to-day involvement, where clear lines of communication and strong professional relationships are critical to preventing domestic abuse and protecting victims from further harm. We've been developing domestic abuse plans. We have 4 success measures and action plans to achieve them. Those 4 success measures that we've defined are protecting the most vulnerable in Walsall from abuse, reduction in perpetrators offending and re-offending, gathering evidence to understand what works, to adopt new approaches, and reduce the number of victims.
My name is Haps Kaur and I'm the Domestic Violence Services Manager in Walsall. I manage a domestic violence refuge. It's quite a large refuge. We have 24 units. It's a mixture of single rooms and family rooms. We also have some dispersed properties throughout the local community where we can also support victims as well, and that includes male victims too. The refuge provides safe and secure accommodation for women and children who have left the environment and come to refuge after their traumatic domestic violence abuse experience. We help support with practical and emotional needs of the victims. This can include setting up universal credit, supporting to write police statements and attendance at court. Safety is of paramount to victims, so for every family that comes through the door we complete a DASH risk assessment, and where the victim is deemed to be at high risk we work with Walsall Marek to ensure that that risk is looked at. and as a result we review risk assessments every single month and beforehand if needed. So from my experience, complex domestic violence victims can be excluded from mainstream services and refuge accommodation due to their very nature of posing a risk to other service users and children within services. The challenge then becomes where are they placed, and sometimes they can be placed in hostels where they are at risk of more vulnerabilities and risks. So we know that domestic violence and abuse is on the increase. National statistics for England and Wales shows that there's a 10% increase this year on sexual abuse crimes. There's also been a 25% rise in the calls made to the domestic abuse helpline. And locally, on average, 170 calls were made to the force throughout the lockdown period. The true figure of domestic violence and abuse would be much higher, as we have a lot of victims who are suffering in silence during this period of COVID.
I'm Herbie Kosa and I'm a housing giver for Walsall Council. These domestic abuse victims have been in a very traumatic situation and in very adverse conditions. Some of them don't know how to live independently because they've never had that freedom of doing that, because they've been controlled. Everything's been done for them as a matter of control. So those kind of things are very important to get to the grips of and do. So with these complex cases, we do have tools in place where we do mitigate risk. So for example, we have MARAC, Multi-Agency Referral Action Centre, and this is partner agencies. We all sit together and we all discuss high risk, very high risk domestic abuse victims, and we try to minimise their risk and safeguard them at the time. I also attend ODOC, which is one day, one conversation, and this is looking at the perpetrators, the high-risk perpetrators, and again partner agencies, looking at the perpetrators and how we can manage the perpetrators to stop them reoffending on domestic abuse. Then we have a sanctuary scheme which I run, and the sanctuary scheme is basically we look at safeguarding the properties. A lot of victims don't want to move, rightfully so, because they want to stay in their current environment. It's stability for them. So the sanctuary schemes gives them extra security, for example, window locks, door locks, extra security measures so that they can stay in their home. Coupled with the legal measures they have, they feel quite secure staying there. And I'm also a first responder to modern day slavery and trafficking. So that is part of a lot of domestic abuse does revolve around domestic modern day slavery and trafficking. And it is all about mitigating risk, safeguarding, having the centre around the domestic abuse victim, and it's about understanding their world, not doing facts, but understanding what their world is like being a domestic abuse victim.
My journey started, obviously I was in Pakistan, I was born there and I brought up there, then I came here because I got married. And my husband was living here. He wanted a person who could come to him and his family to treat them, to make them food, to clean their house. My mom's friend, she helped me out and she called the police. Police has escorted me because I couldn't do it by myself. She helped me out. The police escorted me from their house and they brought me here to my friend's house. I've been living there for a few days and then I end up in a refuge. Then Herbie came along, and in a refuge she asked me must have get indefinite leave first and then you can get a house. So she helped me out in that refuge. I want my little one to not get in those circumstances. For myself, I want to get a nice job. Obviously I'm building up with my functional skills and maths, so I want to go for like a manager post or like that. So accountant or manager post, that's my priority to go there.